And so he enabled me to say all of the things that were hurting and to have screaming fit if I needed to, and let it all out without him taking it personally, and with me having the space where all the person was going to do was pass me another box of tissues. They weren't going to say, there, dear, stop crying, which is the ghastliest thing to say to anybody in that state.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I am the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions in Iowa in the United States of America. And if you are in Iowa and listening, if you are interested in telehealth, we're still doing that. We're also still doing outpatient mental health therapy in any of our 6 office locations.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am the Vice President at Heart and Solutions in charge of our BHIS department. So BHIS stands for Behavioral Health Intervention Services, and that is our program where we go in-home and work with children ages 4 through 18 on different behavioral skills. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So our guest today joins us from the United Kingdom. So we are very, very excited to hear from this transformational life coach, leadership coach, and qualified transpersonal psychotherapist. We've got Elen Sentier here today. Elen has a YouTube channel. She's got a podcast. She's got 12 books, 3 of which are bestsellers. She focuses on helping women to rediscover their true selves, helping us to reconnect to nature, which can be so difficult, especially for those of us who live in the city, who see the sky in between buildings for the most part, or we see grass on the sidewalk surrounding trees. And so we are very, very excited to have Elen here and to learn more about reconnecting with nature and the way that she empowers women through her practice and through these different modalities. So welcome, Elen. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Julie and Chrissa. It's really great to be here. And I am so glad with your title, because people are afraid of counseling and people are afraid of asking help. And sometimes still, unfortunately, asking for help is really sort of like, oh, really? You don't need that? And that does not help at all, because we all need it, all of us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that your message is so inclusive. And the way that you talk with women and help women, whether they're leaders or moms or family, being able to help women to really get more connected with our needs and accepting that we can have needs. We all should have needs. We all do have needs, and we're allowed to help ourselves to fulfill those needs. And so whether it's through counseling or whether it's through coaching, being able to ask for help, so important. So tell me about reconnecting with nature, because this is something we haven't talked about at all in 125 episodes. So I'm so excited to hear about this.
Well, we are part of nature, but unfortunately, most of us, certainly in the Western world, live in cities. So we live in these concrete boxes or brick-built boxes, and we've got a bit of garden, what you call yard over there, maybe a tree, maybe some trees on the sidewalk and grass by it, as you say. But everywhere is like this with buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And how many birds have you got in your yard coming? Do your children know about worms in the ground? Do they actually see mice in the hedge, if you've got a hedge? And we're so cut off from that. And I've met families, particularly when I've been out. I'm a complete wild person, wild woman. And I live in the middle of nowhere, up a dirt track, quarter of a mile up a dirt track, off a single track lane. And the nearest major road is 2 miles away. So I just don't see all this stuff. I'm in heaven. But being in heaven means I do understand how it isn't for others.
Mm-hmm.
And I meet families. I mean, I met some, a few weeks ago. I was up on, we've got big moorland and lovely hills all around us. And I go up and walk there. And there was this mum and her little boy coming along. It was about 8 or 9. And he'd just seen this caterpillar come out because it was quite warm. And this one was out early. And it's one of those furry ones. You seen the furry ones? Now, there's been talk that these are dangerous and poisonous and you can get horrible things off them and all this. And he was there. I said, what's that? Oh, it's furry, and it was gorgeous to watch. And Mum was saying, oh, don't touch it. It might hurt you. And there's this poor little kid. And he couldn't because Mum didn't know. And so I tried to tell Mum, but I think Mum had believed the TV and the books instead. And I took the caterpillar on my finger and I said, he's fine, he's not hurting me. And it's that happens. And if you disconnect and you're frightened of, a big tree might fall on you, or you might fall in the river, or, I mean, you've even heard people being frightened of hedgehogs. You know what a hedgehog is? You have hedgehogs over there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, really? These are not man-eating hedgehogs. You're going to be safe. But we don't know. It happens because people don't know. Mm-hmm. And so I try to encourage people and sort of say, some of the things you do, it's like, well, how about, have you got a tree or a park near you or something like that? Could you just go and sit under the tree or by a pond if you've got a pond in your park or something? And they sort of goes, well, yes, but I'll have to take, a rug or something to sit on because, the ground might be dirty. And you go, have you got a washing machine? And it's like, they need to cut off. But gradually you talk through, and there's lots more than that. You talk through and they get to touch the tree and actually put your face against it and feel it. And feel the rough bark and feel the air and feel the ground underneath you. And my newsletter is coming out on Sunday, a little exercise. I said, go out, take your shoes and socks off and go and stand on the grass. Just for a minute or two, even if it's freezing cold, you can last a minute and then you can put your socks back on. And so I took a photograph of my feet in a bit of grass with some daisies. And it's just being able to do that and feel that you are not a separate being and nature isn't out to get you. Because once you start feeling connected to that, and you realize that Julie is part of nature and Chrissa is part of nature and Ellen is part of nature, then it's much easier to connect to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So how do you use your coaching to help so you talked about how you give them exercises to go find a tree nearby or things like that. But what if they're not in the city, if they're not near nature, how do you help incorporate people to get more comfortable with nature then?
Well, you can at least get comfortable with a pot plant in your room. And most people find that they like some sort of pot plant and learning how to look after them. And I've got a friend who likes orchids. I don't particularly like orchids, but they are very beautiful. And they're very hard work to take care of. So, so well, how do you do it? And so she was telling me, and she doesn't know much about looking after ferns, and I like looking after ferns. And so we were teaching each other that, and it was like, you've got to have this sort of soil for the fern, and you've got to make sure that it hasn't grown its pot, because its roots will get too big and then it'll be all squished up. And all of these sort of things, and they're touching something which is not human, and you're learning how it lives, and you're learning how to help it live. And if you want to get sort of, what benefit is a plant to me? Well, it's they're pushing out oxygen, girl, because that's what they do, all these green leaf plants. So it's helping you breathe. And again, people don't think of that. So even with a pot plant, you can get to it. And people do go on holidays. And if you go to the beach, there's loads of nature at the beach if you can get to the beach. Bit more difficult because you've got further to go to the beach where you are.
Yeah, we're a little landlocked here, but we have a lot of grass. We have a lot of fields.
Yeah, you do. Do you have trees there as well?
Mm-hmm. We have trees. We do not have as much. So I grew up in Massachusetts. So I grew up on the East Coast, and there's a lot of trees there. Yeah. And it's kind of shocking coming out. I remember coming to Iowa for the first time and flying here and looking down and going, oh my gosh, what is this? Because there aren't trees, right? Which makes the wind so strong. And so I think, growing up in New England, I never thought much about trees. And now that I live in Iowa, I experience life without so many trees, and it gives me a different appreciation for trees. We've got some shade trees. They're actually, it's kind of best of both worlds because they're actually technically in our neighbor's yard, but they shade our yard. And it gives such a different kind of perspective on them. And it gives me so much more gratitude for those ones that we do have than I think I ever had when I was in Massachusetts. I love your example of the potted plant. It made me laugh because some people would consider me a minimalist and some people would not. But I consider myself in some ways. And one of the ways that I do is that if I make a purchase, I am very methodical about it and I think a lot about it. And so probably since November, I've been thinking to myself, I should get a potted plant for my house, and thought about it for like months because I've got a cat, I've got a small child, right? And so what you were saying about when we don't know, when we don't understand things about nature and connecting with nature, that really resonated with me because I thought, well, I can't get a plant because I have a cat, and a lot of, orchids are poison for cats, all these different plants. And, my cat is pretty rambunctious. Like he will probably knock it over. And I've got a child and I've got a lot of things on my plate already. Right. So it was like I was deciding, should I get a dog? I was like, do I have time to care for this plant properly? Or am I going to just get it and kill it? Well, on Mother's Day, so now I had been thinking about getting a plant for about 6 months. And on Mother's Day, my sister-in-law showed up to Mother's Day lunch with a plant for each of us. And it's beautiful. It's she put it in a teacup, and it's purple and furry, and it's called a purple passion. It's beautiful and it's small. And I was like, oh, this is great. And so I looked it up, not poisonous to cats, right? Like safe for animals. I'm like, this is great. But then it was this whole process, and it was an enjoyable process to go, okay, where am I going to put this plant? The teacup didn't have a hole for water to drain out the bottom. So it's a beautiful vessel. But I thought, well, I'm going to drill some holes in the bottom so that I can put, water in there and have it go into this saucer. And so I had to learn how to drill holes into ceramic, right? And all of these different pieces that, I touched a lot of dirt while I was repotting this plant. And all of these pieces that kind of come with even ownership of, not ownership, but caring for a plant that's in your house, it is a big responsibility. There are a lot of things to do with it, and those can be such enjoyable processes. And when we're nurturing a plant or a cat or, a squirrel that lives in our yard, when we're nurturing and caretaking for those other living beings, we experience the benefit of nurturing ourselves. And so in so many ways, we get to reparent ourselves as we care for these other living creatures. And we've had a couple episodes now talking about, women who either by choice or not by choice do not have children. And sometimes that piece that society thinks, oh, well, you won't have that nurture, that opportunity to nurture. And the truth is, and I love what you're saying, no, we have the opportunity to nurture all the time. That fat squirrel that sits outside my house, I have the opportunity to nurture that squirrel, and in that way benefit from that nurturing myself. So I think that all of these examples are great. It made me think of your caterpillar story made me think of my daughter. When she was very, very small, we had a statewide issue with wild parsnips, which I guess is much worse than poison ivy. So if you touch the leaves or the flowers, you get these massive like skin boils. And I was terrified. And so all I knew about them, though, was they're a yellow flower. And so anywhere we went, right? And as humans, as animals, we are designed, programmed, we've got an instinct to avoid certain things, right? Like we don't eat blue most of the time. Like our brain says blue, don't eat that, right? Things like that. So when we saw those yellow flowers, and I think I passed that fear on to my daughter, because when she was 5, she would see dandelions and go, Mom, the poison flower, right? The poison, or like we'd see tulips and she'd go, the poison flower. And I said, no, it's not. So I had to get clearer. I had to look up, what does wild parsnip actually look like, and show it to her, and then show her different flowers and get her involved in, I put dandelions in my smoothies. And so getting her involved in picking those dandelions for me so that she wouldn't be afraid of all poison or all yellow flowers, but that she could just be aware of these wild parsnips and what they specifically look like. So I think your example of the fuzzy caterpillar is so beautiful, because it's so true, and it just really, really resonated for me as well.
It's so important, isn't it? And all of it you were saying was about connecting. You connected to the plant, you connected to the teacup, and you and the teacup had to negotiate how to be together so that the teacup could look after the plant and you could look after the plant, and the teacup would still be all right even if it had holes in it, and which is quite difficult to do. So well done you. And been there, done that.
It was hard.
It is. But it's so much this connection with something that isn't you and isn't human. And because we don't see things regularly that are not human, not easily, you see a squirrel in your yard, but squirrel doesn't come in probably. Cats okay, dogs okay. We have cats and dogs. Maybe we have hamsters if we're children or something, but we don't see things. I mean, when did you last see a fox, for instance? And you definitely got them in Iowa, but when did you see one? And so I've had children out here. I don't have children, but there are children who come around sometimes. And they just say, oh, what's that red one over there? That big red thing like a dog. It's a fox. Oh, what's a fox? But being kids, of course, they've got this super wonder, haven't they? Kids have this wonder. And as grown-ups, we get such busy lives, we probably lose the wonder. So nature is also about us women connecting back to the wonder that we had when we were children. So you can actually go out and say, wow, just look at that sunset. I can see it over the chimney pots even. And it's fantastic. Look at the color. And you can actually do that. You just go, oh, sky. And I've seen people, it makes me cry because I've seen people, I used to live in London for 20 odd years. And I've seen people who was like, oh, sky. And they don't see. So, there's this huge, gorgeous world we live on. We don't see most of it. And once you get somebody connected back to that, I think it really helps them with the counseling. And if they realize that actually counseling can just be about getting connected, it does not have to mean that you're going to, need a brain surgeon in about 3 weeks or anything like that. And people think, oh, well, I'm ill if I've got to have counseling. No, you're not. Well, you are in a sense because you're disconnected. And that's just sort of like having a permanent cold or something. But you eat properly. So you eat brain properly, counseling. And you go, oh, I'm okay. And it's that learning to feel okay, isn't it, Julie, as well? I'm okay. I'm enough. I'm good enough. We do get put down as women sometimes for that, even now.
I was curious your counseling story. So I know you noted to us that counseling and your own counseling journey is what led you into becoming a psychotherapist as well. So can we go into that story and what led you to counseling?
Yes. There is some of the reason why I went. That's the only bit you can see. This is rheumatoid arthritis. I have it everywhere in my body. And I did have a great job as a software engineer for a long time in London, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then rheumatoid arthritis can hit very quickly. It's an autoimmune disease. It's not just a ropey joints disease. And it hit pretty well overnight. And fairly quickly, I couldn't walk as far as the underground or the bus to get into work. And I couldn't manage the computers that we had at work. And I couldn't sit for very long. And so I was medically retired, which I partly didn't want to be, partly knew I had to be because there wasn't any future any other way. And I enjoyed my work. I'm one of those weird people who actually enjoys their work quite often. And so I had a real loss. And I lost the work environment that I had enjoyed. I lost the going into the middle of London and, being able to go out after work or go out and do good shopping in the middle of the day or whatever. And that was gone. And fortunately, I knew someone who was very, very good. And so he started taking me on and walking me through what is your, as we say, in business and sort of things, what is your why going to be? What are you going to do? What do you want in your heart? No, you can no longer dance. No, you can no longer go walking. No, you can no longer do your old job. So what is still there? What do you, or is what has just come in that is new that you want? And also, the other thing that he did, which was amazingly good for me, was he enabled me to have the grief. I didn't have to sit there and, well, I'm all right, really. How we all sort of say, oh, how are you? How are you? And everybody expects you to go, I'm good, back. And half the time you're inside going, humpy. And we don't say it. And so he enabled me to say all of the things that were hurting and to have screaming fit if I needed to. And let it all out without him taking it personally. And with me having the space where all the person was going to do was pass me another box of tissues. They weren't going to say, there, dear, stop crying. which is the ghastliest thing to say to anybody in that state. So he took me all through this. And then I went along to one of his lectures at London University. And I just knew from the way he talked about the transpersonal, he was a transpersonal therapist, and the way he talked about that, that's what I've got to do. And so the counseling actually brought me into doing it myself, because the way he talked about it, it was so allowing. It enabled you to be you. It didn't try and make you normal or get over something or proper. You know, if you want to be a mess, well, come on, then let's be a really good mess. And which is something he said to me, and I now say to other people, you know, we're really going to do this. Let's get into it. Put our hearts into being a mess. And which quite often makes people laugh after they've done a bit messy. But it was that whole thing of being allowed. And a good counselor allows you to be you and encourages you to be you. And they're not going to be upset or offended, or you can have an ego fit at them and do a bunch of attitude at them, and they'll go, yeah, okay, fine, right. No. Could you do that again? Because I missed a bit. Or, you know, something like that, which will actually take you right through the whole thing and dissolve it. So that's what sort of set me off. And, you know, one thing was cut off and the door was open for a new thing because somebody was able to hear me.
That's so powerful. And it was so powerful that it changed your life and made you want to give that gift to others. And that is beautiful. The ability to have somebody in our lives where we can just be whoever we are, and whoever we are, even in that moment, we can express the parts of ourselves that don't even fit with our primary identity. So, you know, for me, I feel like I'm a fairly responsible person. I feel like I, you know, usually have my stuff together, maybe a little too much. But I can also send a rage email to my therapist, or like I can have a 6-year-old tantrum in session. And that, you know, that's a piece of me that needs to be expressed. It doesn't fit with these other identities, right, that I kind of have in my life, but it's still a part of me. It's still there. And so it needs to have a place to go. And I'll send an email to my therapist, and it'll be a full-on fit. Like if my daughter had that, you know, as a 4-year-old, I'd be like, come on, really? Like, are we having a tantrum right now? And I'll know I'm doing it as I'm sending it. And then we'll come back to the session the next week, and she'll be like, do you want to talk about that or no? And I'll be like, no, not really. And it's, you know, and it's fine, because it doesn't impact the relationship that we have. That relationship, you know, you've talked a lot about connection. And that is really what all of it comes down to: counseling, coaching, connecting with nature, connecting with other women. It all comes down to connection, and how important that is to us as human beings that are also animals. And so we're part of nature. And in that way, we can say, well, I don't like the way that other person behaved towards me, right? Like I don't like that these rabbits ate all my tomatoes. But at the same time, those plants are part of this system. I'm part of this system, and those rabbits are part of this system. And that person that made me angry is part of this system. So being able to see it that way, as we're all part of this together, and we're all connected together, can help with that, with some of those challenging feelings that we all have as humans. So it's what a beautiful share that you just gave us. We appreciate that.
But thank you for that too, because this, you know, when Right, I'm going to say this two ways, because what quite often is said is, oh, she really upset me. Instead of what you need to come back to, and it's this sort of like perspective distance, is that I was really upset by what she said. And she may not have had the slightest intention of upsetting you. It's just what you heard and what she was hoping to mean just went in completely different directions. And because you can usually get it when somebody's really out to get you. You can feel that energy. But we can get upset by something that happens. And actually, it's us being upset. And that actually takes me into, you mentioned it while we were chatting before, that my big thing at the moment has been for, well, a year now, is tell your story. Because why did I get upset when she said that? All she said was that your hair's looking really weird. And then you go and actually look in the mirror and, you know, without the glasses on, with all the vision stuff that you normally have, you go, actually, it does. Yeah. And so you think, well, what's the matter? Do I need some more conditioner or whatever kind of thing? But what is it what was sparked deep down inside, which is something old that you've probably forgotten or hidden in a cupboard or the attic or something of your mind and haven't taken out? And that, just what she said or the way she said it, just hit that trigger. And as long as you've still got the trigger inside, you'll keep on having that reaction. And so your friends may find you a bit prickly now and again. You know, oh, I can't say that to Ellen. You know what she's going to do, don't you? And if you go back inside, and again, I've done this, and I still do this every day, because being a counselor, I have a mentor, of course, because there's no way you cope on your own. And so I go back in, and what's the trigger that set that off? And maybe we have to do a sort of journey, or what Jung calls active imagination, you know, where I sort of talk through a dream or something, or we do doodle drawings, which can bring it out, or anything like that. You go, oh my God, I'd forgotten all about that. That happened when I was 4. And I don't remember it. And now I do. And then you can take it out. And it's in the air, because it's in between you and your counselor. And you can look at it and you go, well, do I actually need that anymore? Or is it, you know, like they say in the shops, is it past its sell-by date? And if it is, well, maybe I'll put it in the compost caddy and then put it on the potted plant or the garden or whatever. And bye-bye, gone. Don't need that trigger anymore. And all Ellen's friends go, what have you done? You're not half as prickly as you used to be. You used to be like cuddling a hedgehog.
Well, I love the compost example too, because it's not only that we don't need it, so we shed it because it's not helping us anymore, but also we're using it to grow something else. And so composting is such a great example, because once we understand some of these things in ourselves, once we can go, okay, I'm feeling angry that this rabbit ate my tomato. And if we go, okay, but that is a different kind of feeling than, oh, there's a mountain lion looking at me right now, right? Or like there's a bear looking at me while I'm walking down this trail, right? Those are so different, because it brings to mind what you said about, you know, you can tell when somebody's kind of like intent, like out to get you, trying to do this, when there's a mountain lion around, right? Or when there's a bear around, when there's a toxic person around,
lips, you know you've had it.
Yes, then you can tell, right? But if it's a situation where somebody did something that we were triggered, and that is a rabbit in the garden situation, that rabbit is just doing what rabbits do. They're not out saying, oh, I'm going to really upset
it's
Julie by
Julie's
eating
tomatoes.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, let's get them.
I mean, they're just out there doing what rabbits do and eating those. But if I have personal identity tied up in those tomatoes, right? If I go, well, if these tomatoes fail, then I failed at this and I always fail at stuff. And so this is just one more thing, right? If I have that going on, I'm going to be real mad at those rabbits. If I have a feeling of scarcity in my life, right? If it triggers something in me that comes back to survival, even though in my brain, I know that I can walk down the street and there are 3 different places I can buy tomatoes, right, for $1. Even if I know that in my brain, part of me might still be triggered by that rabbit eating my tomatoes because part of my brain goes, oh my gosh, they just ate my food. They just ate my only food, right? And that can really, really upset us. If I know that these are the things that are coming up for me, when a rabbit does a neutral thing that rabbits do, like eating a tomato, then I can use that to understand other people and their responses better as well, because I can go, oh no, like I'm one of them. I do that too, right?
I did that last night.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So then I can go, oh, okay, yeah, that person was kind of, I love that you say prickly like a hedgehog. Ooh, that person, all I did was say, excuse me, or whatever it was. And they looked at me like I, was trying to run them over or something. And so I can go, ooh, but yeah, I mean, maybe like my car was close. Maybe they've been in a car accident, and maybe they've had this experience. I don't know. I just don't know. But once we know that we have those that we couldn't even see in ourselves, we go, oh, if it took me this much work to figure that out for myself, there's no way I can in that instant understand how that person is experiencing the interaction that we had.
Absolutely.
So it's what great examples of use it even in the language that we use, being able to say, well, that person made me mad. If they didn't make me mad, I wouldn't have keyed their car, right? Instead of that person made me
I'm
mad.
not parking anywhere near you.
we go, oh, that person ran a red light and I was triggered by that because that made me feel unsafe. It made me feel unsafe for myself and my child because we cross that street at the crosswalk all the time. And so when I saw this person run this red light, in my head, I responded as though they had hit us in the crosswalk and endangered me or my child.
Yeah. And that is so, it so happens, doesn't it? Maybe that, I mean, it's something I do find, and I found with my psychotherapy clients, particularly because they come for very, very deep work, obviously. But it's like, can I own my own feelings? Or am I going to put them out there on somebody else? Or am I going to accept that I felt really vulnerable in this situation? And because, as they all say, attack is the best method of defense, because I was feeling vulnerable. And it's getting someone to the state where they can sort of say, I felt like crap this morning. I felt really vulnerable. I was scared to death when that man knocked on the door. Or that person in the supermarket was really weird. And they can say that. And then they can sort of go back and say, because you come out with those things first. And then you can go back and sort of say, well, that person in the supermarket actually looked really weird to me. Because I haven't seen anybody like that before, or for not a long time. Or maybe I saw somebody like that when I was 6 and they were frightening. Or I found them frightening for some reason. And it might just be because, you were 3'2" and they were 8'10" and they were looming over you. But it's this case of owning what you feel and not saying somebody else did it to you. And that whole thing, you can't, I don't think, anyway, you can get over those on your own. This is where I think I call myself a co-pilot. I'm a co-pilot who co-pilots your life with you and sort of says, well, I'm not really sure we should accelerate now. I think we really ought to accelerate now. And that kind of thing. And the other side of it is, I don't know, lots of people don't know, but I'm a therapist. Okay, so are you. But you know where the word therapist comes from? It's Greek. And the Greek word is theraps. And what it means is somebody who walks alongside. Not somebody who shoves you along from behind, not somebody who hauls you along from in front, but who walks alongside at your pace, helping you, saying, there's a hole coming up, there's a log coming up, you might not want to trip over it. On the other hand, you might. And well, sometimes falling over something really helps. But it's this idea that you have got someone who walks beside you, not someone who's trying to turn you into something. And I think a lot of people are afraid of counseling because they're afraid they're going to be turned into something that they don't know and don't like and don't want. And good counseling never, ever does that. One of the things of finding a counselor for me, and I mean, it certainly happened for me, I don't know, on autopilot or whatever, but is the chemistry between you and that person. They can have alphabet soup after their name and, degrees from Harvard or wherever it is. And you don't like them. They don't ring for you. Whereas somebody else who's just got a certificate in something or another, you go, oh, really like that person. And you've got to get that chemistry together. And because that's connection again, because then they will hear you and you will be able to hear them. And you will feel safe enough to talk to them. So just because your friend Arlene down the road really likes this counsellor, Mr. Bloggs, doesn't mean to say you've got to. You and Bloggs might not get on at all. On the other hand, you might. But always look for the chemistry. And it comes back the other way too, because sometimes somebody comes to me and wants counselling, and I sort of go, I think I'm not right person for you, which is usually the sort of thing I say. I don't sort of say, no, I can't bear to counsel you, which may be what's going on inside, but it's like, no, that's my overreaction. I am not the right person for that person. And it's my responsibility as a counsellor to know that and sort of say, not me, but you could try my friend Faye or my friend Dan down the road. And be able to say that, because you can't help somebody that you're not going to love. Mm-hmm. And you do love your clients. Do you find that, Julie, that you actually love your clients?
Yeah, there's like a counselor love. And it's, it reminds me always of the idea of like mother love, right? Mother love is a different concept than romantic love is a different concept than, the love you have for your nieces and nephews and for your, whoever it is. And the love you have for your friends is a different kind of love than the love you have for your coworkers. And so, yeah, there's definitely a version of love that comes in those sessions. And it is, in the best cases is a two-way relationship. And it's a different kind of love than people write about in storybooks. Nicholas Sparks doesn't write about he doesn't write about counselor love.
You need to end the counseling relationship fast.
Absolutely. So, it is so different. But it's its own unique entity. Counselor love, the love that counselors feel for their clients and the love that clients feel for their counselors. And so often, the love that I feel for my counselor is so different because I don't even know her. I just know how she shows up. I know how she shows up for me. And I know the energy she brings for me in those times that we're together. And I have love for that. So It is absolutely a version of love, right? Very different from mother love or romantic love or any other kind, but its own unique entity, and so important. I love what you said about chemistry too, because it reminds me of food preference. Like food preference is all chemical. Like it is what feels, what lights up different parts of my brain when it hits my taste buds, and there might be foods that, well, when Chrissa and I went to New England, right, there were foods that were like super expensive and fancy, and Chrissa was like, no, no, thank you. um, and for me too, like there are foods that everybody loves, and I'm like, oh, no, no, thank you, right? Because it does a different thing chemically in my mouth, for my brain, in my bloodstream, even than it does for someone else. And so just because like you said, if they've got alphabet soup behind their name and they're a fancy like caviar type therapist, right? But that might hit my brain and my bloodstream and my brain and go like, I don't like that fishy taste, right? Versus like, if I go to McDonald's and I get some fries, like I'm pretty happy, right? So because like that does a totally different thing to my brain, right? So
what I think is you need a counselor who is like a tomato. You need tomato counselors.
That's right. One that provides my meets my survival instinct need, right?
On the other hand, won't give you a rabbit counselor.
Identity. Oh man. Only if they don't eat my tomatoes.
Yeah, no, you're quite right.
So yeah, I think it's beautiful. And I also, when you were talking about, because you're in your description of the work that you do, you talk for women, you help women be powerful. And the way that you write it, and it sounds like for you, language is so important. You acknowledge that importance of language, and so when we think about the sounds, powerful, we think POWERFUL, powerful, and we have all kinds of like CEO imagery, right, and like king imagery, and all of this, and but what you're describing is powerful, full of power. And it can feel like when we take ownership of our own emotions that we are giving away power in some ways, because now there's responsibility on us for our own emotions. And so, but actually what's happening is we are becoming full of power when we do that, because people can, like, somebody can cut me off in traffic, they can steal my lunch out of the work fridge, they can do whatever annoying thing that they're going to do, and they can't touch me emotionally. They cannot upset me, because I get to choose. I have the power over how I think about a situation, which then translates into how I feel about a situation. And our knowledge and our understanding of ourselves and the things that we have learned in terms of our thoughts, those are things that can never be taken from us. And so, you described a significant life loss as a software engineer when you were diagnosed with the rheumatoid arthritis, and it caused that medical retirement. That's a huge loss. And when we think about our lives and the things that we can lose, the people that we can lose, the lifestyles that we can lose, the job titles that we can lose, the experiences that we can lose, but the things that we can never, people can't take away from us, the way that we think about things, the things that we have learned, and the things that we understand about ourselves and the world. Those are things that we can trust. And even when other things are, that we might think of as stable or sturdy, like our career, even when those things ultimately can be taken, the way that we think about things can't be. So it's a good investment to be investing our time and energy into that.
Yes.
So we'd love to hear, if you were to talk to somebody who might be on the fence about starting counseling, what suggestion might you give that person?
How would you like to have a friend who is going to walk beside you, listen to you, You can have a screaming rage act. You can have a laughing fit act. You can dance around the room with, and they're still going to look at you easily. They're not going to hate you. How would you like to have somebody you could tell the whole of your heart to? Go look for that. And you'll find it more by the chemistry, the look in the person's eyes when you look at them and yours, what happens to you in your heart. When you find them, go for it. Because they will feel it back. This is a two-way thing that happens, so don't be scared. And you will love it. Life will just go way big.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you are interested in any of Elen's services, you can find her at elensentier.com, and you can find more about her Wild Woman retreats that we didn't even get to talk about yet, but you can look those up there, and her Tell Your Story program, and at Elen Sentier on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and at Badass Wisdom on YouTube and podcasts as well.
Well, I'm definitely Elen Sentier. And I certainly need a counselor.
Awesome. Us too.
Yes. And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236. And if you're a provider seeking play therapy CEUs, you can find us on patreon.com/youneedatraining. We'll see you for the next episode, Sunday at 5.